dear ones, come sit here with me. Because today, who's going to tell us her story is a young woman named Emma. Dear Emma was exhausted after a long day, but still found the heart to help a lost elderly lady at the airport. What she didn't know was that this sweet old woman, Margaret, was the mother of a powerful millionaire. And she was hiding a dark secret from the past. What began as a simple coffee turned into a friendship, visits to a grand mansion, and even an unexpected encounter with Margaret's son, Andrew. But when Emma mentioned the name of her late father, everything changed. It's a story about injustice, love, courage, and redemption. So, get your tea ready, sweetheart. Because this story will stir your emotions, and show you that even the deepest pain can bloom into hope.
Of course, Nana Rose, the story begins at JFK Airport, which throbbed with thousands of stories from different people passing through. Suitcases spun on relentless carousels, luminous advertisements vied for attention, and the constant hum formed a familiar cacophony for those who, like me, Emma Johnson, spend a good portion of their lives transiting between flights and video edits. On that day, however, the routine felt heavier. The deadline for a project haunted me, and the prospect of facing New York's chaotic traffic left me exhausted even before I arrived home. It was then that I saw her. A woman with a deeply lined face and a vacant stare, wandering hesitantly between the check-in counters. The sheer bewilderment etched upon her features caught my eye. Something about her evoked memories of my grandmother, the fragility that time inevitably inflicts, and the occasional need for a simple act of kindness. I momentarily relinquished the urgency that had been consuming me and approached her. "Can I help you?" I asked, striving to imbue my voice with a sense of calm. She turned, her eyes welling with relief. "My dear, I can't seem to locate my departure gate. I'm so disoriented by all this commotion." Her name was Margaret Reynolds. The tremulous voice, the elegant accent, the delicacy in her gestures. Helping her find the correct gate was easier than I had anticipated, but the gratitude she expressed seemed disproportionate to my minor deed. As we walked together, I discovered she was on her way to visit her son, Andrew, in Connecticut. She spoke of him with immense affection, yet also with a certain apprehension, as if she carried an invisible burden concerning him. The farewell at the gate was brief, yet brimming with emotion. Margaret clasped my hand tightly, her eyes unwavering. "You're an angel, dear. God bless you." At that moment, I couldn't have fathomed that chance encounter would alter the trajectory of my life. I returned to my routine, my videos, my cramped Brooklyn apartment. The image of Margaret, however, lingered in my mind, like a gentle melody that refused to fade away. A few days later, I received an unexpected message on social media. It was Margaret. With the assistance of a friend, she had tracked me down and was insistent on inviting me for coffee. I initially hesitated. My life was a constant whirlwind, and free time was a luxury I rarely afforded myself. However, there was something about the sincerity of her request that precluded me from declining. Coffee dates morphed into lunches, and those lunches blossomed into extended conversations. I discovered Margaret possessed a magnanimous spirit, coupled with a life story both rich and intricate. She discoursed on art, literature, and the intricacies of gardening, and she shared cherished recollections of Andrew's childhood and the trials they had navigated as a couple. Gradually, I found myself growing closer to her, as if we were lifelong confidants. One day, Margaret invited me to lunch at her home, a stately manor house in Connecticut. The garden was verdant, bursting with rose bushes of every hue and fragrance imaginable. The house itself, imposing and elegant, emanated an aura of sophistication and history. It was there that I first met Andrew. He was a reserved man with a piercing gaze and precise gestures. Initially, he seemed wary of my presence, as if meticulously assessing me. The formality in his tone of voice was a stark contrast to Margaret's warm welcome. I discerned that he was protective of his mother and that my sudden friendship with her made him circumspect. That lunch was merely the first of many. Visits to Margaret's house became frequent occurrences, and gradually, Andrew began to open up. I discovered that he was a successful entrepreneur, possessed of a brilliant mind and a fervent passion for innovation. Yet, behind the facade of the astute businessman lay a sensitive soul and a solitary heart. And then in a seemingly offhand remark, I happened to mention my father's name, John Anderson, a gardener who loved plants and taught me to appreciate the beauty of the natural world. The name seemed to strike Margaret and Andrew like a bolt of lightning. Silence descended upon the room, thick and suffocating. The expressions on their faces morphed, betraying a complex blend of surprise, shock, and unease. In that instant, I knew something was amiss. Something that inextricably linked my father to the Reynolds family's past. Something that was about to upend everything. The atmosphere in the Reynolds house, once so welcoming, had now turned frigid. The silence, formerly a refuge, now reverberated like an accusation. Margaret and Andrew's words, once so affectionate, hung in the air, laden with a weight I couldn't comprehend. The connection I felt with them, so strong and genuine, seemed on the verge of unraveling in the face of this unspoken revelation. I began piecing things together. My father's name, their reaction, the poorly recounted story of his dismissal. A shadow hung over the past, and I was at its epicenter without understanding why. Curiosity morphed into necessity, necessity into obsession. I needed to know the truth, however painful it might be. Andrew broke the silence, his voice laden with trepidation. "Emma, we need to talk. There are things about the past you need to know." What followed was a fragmented account, riddled with half-truths and omissions. My father, John Anderson, had been in the employ of the Reynolds family for nearly 2 decades. He was a gifted horticulturalist, an honest and dedicated man. But at some juncture he had been accused of theft and dismissed by Richard Reynolds, Andrew's father. Andrew's account was vague, replete with justifications and mitigating circumstances. He spoke of circumstantial evidence, a misunderstanding, a rash decision made in a moment of crisis. But I sensed there was more to it, something he wasn't divulging. Margaret, for her part, remained silent, her gaze fixed on the floor. The guilt etched on her face was undeniable. She knew the truth, I was certain. But she refused to divulge it, perhaps to shield her son, perhaps to protect herself. Rage began to simmer within me. Rage at the injustice my father had suffered, rage at the lie I had been told, rage at the pain they were inflicting upon me. How could they have concealed this from me? How could they have allowed me to forge a friendship with them, knowing the truth? I resolved to confront them. I demanded they tell me everything, without omission, without excuses. I wanted to know what had truly transpired, what my father had done to warrant such an accusation, what secret they were striving so desperately to conceal. The pressure was so immense that Margaret yielded. Her voice thick with emotion, she began to recount the true story. A tale of envy, of machinations, of a fateful error that would irrevocably alter everyone's destiny. Apparently, my father was deeply loved and admired by everyone in the household. His green thumb was undeniable, and his integrity was beyond reproach. Richard Reynolds, however, felt threatened by the gardener's popularity. Envy gnawed at his soul, fueled by malicious rumors and gossip. In a fit of pique, Richard accused my father of pilfering family heirlooms. The evidence was flimsy, yet Richard's word carried considerable weight. Denied due process, my father was summarily dismissed and ejected from the estate. The humiliation was devastating. My father, a man of principle and unimpeachable integrity, watched his reputation be besmirched by a baseless accusation. The pain consumed him from within, and he was never quite the same man again. The truth hit me like a punch to the gut. Tears streamed down my face, utterly uncontrollable. The image I had of the Reynolds family shattered into a million pieces. Admiration morphed into revulsion, friendship into hatred. How could I possibly love Andrew, the son of the man who ruined my father's life? How could I ever forgive Margaret, complicit in that injustice? The past had encroached upon the present, poisoning all prospects for the future. I decided to distance myself. I needed time to process everything, to grapple with the pain and the rage that were consuming me. I needed to extricate myself from the burden of the past so that I could move forward. I left the Reynolds residence with a fractured heart and a wounded soul. I knew irrevocably that nothing would ever be the same. Trust had been shattered, innocence forfeited. The garden, formerly a haven of beauty and harmony, now stood as a stark symbol of pain and anguish. Distance, however, did not erase the image of Andrew. The melancholic gaze, the hesitant voice, the sincerity in his gestures. She knew he bore no responsibility for his father's transgressions, that he too was a casualty of that history. But the past proved an insurmountable barrier, a rampart of resentment that stood between us. How could we possibly forge a future together, with such a dark secret haunting our every step? Doubt gnawed at me from the inside out. I loved Andrew, but I couldn't bring myself to forgive his family. Love and hate swirled together in a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. I needed to find a way to transcend the past, to forgive and move forward. But how? How could I liberate my heart from the prison of resentment? The answer I knew lay dormant somewhere within me. Isolation had become both my sanctuary and my prison. Amidst the solitude, memories of my father flooded my mind. I recalled his passion for plants, his impeccable work ethic, his infectiously joyful disposition. The injustice he suffered seemed all the more brutal when juxtaposed with his inherent goodness. Andrew's image also lingered. The guilt in his eyes, the sorrow in his voice. I realized he bore the weight of the family's past, that he too was a victim of that history. Distance didn't diminish the affection I felt for him, but rather intensified it, rendering it more complex and poignant. One day, I stumbled upon an old box of letters in my attic. They were letters my father had written to the Reynolds family during the years he worked for them. I hesitated to read them, fearing they would reignite the pain and resentment I had striven so hard to overcome. But curiosity proved too strong. I opened the box and began to read the letters one by one. My father's words were simple, yet brimming with emotion. He expressed gratitude for the opportunity to work for the Reynolds family, spoke of his admiration for Margaret, and his respect for Richard. In one of the letters, penned shortly before his dismissal, my father alluded to a disagreement with Richard. He vehemently refuted the accusations of theft and pleaded for an opportunity to vindicate himself. However, the letter had never reached its intended recipient. The final letter was the most impactful. Written months after his dismissal, it expressed forgiveness. My father stated that he harbored no resentment towards the Reynolds family, that he understood Richard had acted under duress, and that he hoped the truth would one day come to light. My father's words struck me like a bolt of lightning. Forgiveness, the capacity to transcend pain and resentment, a lesson he was imparting to me even from beyond the grave. In that instant, I realized the key to my liberation lay within my grasp. I needed to forgive the Reynolds family, not for their sake, but for my own. I needed to unburden myself of the past's weight, so that I could move forward unencumbered. However, forgiveness didn't equate to oblivion. The injustice my father had endured couldn't be disregarded. But harboring resentment would prove to be a futile endeavor. It was imperative to transmute the pain into fortitude, the rage into purposeful action. I resolved to seek out Andrew. I needed to speak with him, to articulate my feelings, to share my father's letters. I needed to ascertain whether he was willing to confront the past, to acknowledge his family's transgressions, to forge a different future. The reunion was fraught with tension. Words were halting, glances guarded. But gradually sincerity won out. Andrew confessed that he had always known of my father's innocence, admitting to feeling culpable for the injustice he had endured. He disclosed that, in the aftermath of his father's passing, he had unearthed documents substantiating my father's innocence. However, the apprehension of besmirching the family's reputation had hitherto prevented him from divulging the truth. Tears streamed down Andrew's face as he confessed his transgressions. I realized he too was a prisoner of the past, with guilt gnawing away at him from within. "I am so deeply sorry, Emma," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I realize that nothing I can say will ever truly atone for what transpired. However, I am prepared to do whatever it takes to rectify the situation." Those words resonated deeply within my heart. I saw in Andrew a genuine sincerity, a palpable remorse, and a resolute desire for transformation. I realized that he too was seeking liberation from the shackles of the past, that he too yearned to construct a fundamentally different future. I've decided to extend him an opportunity, a chance for mutual absolution, for reconciliation, and to forge a future together, unburdened by the transgressions of the past. Now envision how this applies when you confront a similar predicament. Consider how forgiveness can be liberating, how transcending the past can unlock opportunities for a more auspicious future. After all, resilience is rooted in the capacity to transmute pain into insight, resentment into empathy. We decided then to embark on a new path. Andrew, ignited by my father's fervent passion, resolved to relinquish a portion of his corporate life to dedicate himself to landscaping. He enrolled in courses, voraciously devoured books, and relentlessly sought to expand his knowledge of plants, soil composition, and the delicate equilibrium of nature. He observed with profound admiration the gardens my father had cultivated, meticulously scrutinizing every detail in pursuit of their underlying essence, their inherent secret. I, on the other hand, found in writing a way to process my grief and to honor my father's memory. I began writing a screenplay based on our story, a narrative of injustice, forgiveness, and fresh starts. A story that, despite being painful, carried a message of hope and redemption. At first, writing was a challenge. Reliving the past was painful, confronting my emotions, utterly exhausting. But gradually the words began to flow, as if my father were guiding me, whispering the right phrases, the most vivid imagery into my ear. The screenplay was well received by producers. The story, while intensely personal, resonated with universal themes: the pursuit of justice, the significance of forgiveness, the power of overcoming adversity. The prospect of transforming our pain into art, of sharing our narrative with the world, filled me with hope. However, the path to reconciliation was far from seamless. Trust, once fractured, requires considerable time to mend. Margaret, despite her contrition, still bore the burden of guilt. Andrew, notwithstanding his resolve, continued to grapple with the specters of the past. It took immense patience, profound understanding, and boundless love. It necessitated learning to live with the scars, accepting the imperfections, and cherishing the moments of joy. Above all, it demanded believing in the potential for a different future. Gradually, the wounds began to heal. Margaret, with her warmth and wisdom, blossomed into a cherished friend. Andrew, through his love and unwavering dedication, demonstrated that it was indeed possible to start anew, to forge a felicitous future, even with a past riddled with pain. And then on a sun-drenched spring day we resolved to marry. The selected venue was the Reynolds Manor Garden, the very same garden my father had cultivated with such love and unwavering dedication. The rose bushes, resplendent and vibrant, seemed to exult in our union, our reconciliation, our fresh start. The ceremony was simple yet deeply poignant. The words exchanged, the vows spoken, the embraces received. Margaret's presence, with her radiant smile and the blessing of our friends and family. On that day, the garden bloomed anew. The roses, vibrant and fragrant, stood as emblems of our love, our hope, and our unwavering faith in the future. Injustice, forgiveness, and fresh beginnings coalesced in a celebration of life, love, and reconciliation. Now envision how embracing the past, transmuting pain into fortitude, and maintaining faith in the prospect of a brighter future can positively impact your life. Consider how resilience, compassion, and forgiveness can unlock pathways to happiness and self-actualization. The wedding, however, did not signify the end of the journey, but rather the commencement of a new chapter. The memory of my father, previously a source of grief, evolved into a beacon, guiding our actions and inspiring our choices. Andrew, with his newfound zeal for landscaping, transformed the manor's garden into a sanctuary of beauty and harmony. Each flower, each tree, every detail was meticulously planned, with the aim of honoring my father's legacy and creating a haven of peace and serenity. Furthermore, Andrew immersed himself in social projects, offering his landscaping services to underprivileged communities. He established community gardens, revitalized public spaces, and imparted gardening techniques to at-risk youth. His work was not merely aesthetic, but profoundly social. striving to transform lives through beauty and a connection with the natural world. Similarly, my experience with screenwriting unlocked doors to new opportunities. I was invited to participate in audiovisual projects that tackled themes such as social justice, human rights, and the environment. I used my voice to amplify inspiring narratives, to denounce injustices, and to advocate for social change. Furthermore, Andrew and I have established a foundation in my father's name, with the aim of supporting educational and environmental endeavors. We provide scholarships to gifted young individuals, fund research into sustainable agriculture, and promote awareness regarding the significance of environmental conservation. The shadow of the past still lingered over us. Richard Reynolds, the man who had unjustly accused my father, never publicly retracted his statement. His reputation, despite Andrew's efforts, remained untarnished. The injustice, even after so many years, still stung. Thus, we resolved to confront Richard. We weren't seeking vengeance, but rather justice. We wanted him to acknowledge his transgression, to offer an apology to my father's memory, and to redress the damage he had wrought. The meeting was fraught with tension. Richard, a bitter and solitary man, denied the accusations, justified his actions, and blamed my father for his own downfall. His arrogance and lack of remorse filled me with revulsion. With unwavering composure, Andrew presented the evidence substantiating my father's innocence, his voice resolute and his gaze unwavering. Financial ledgers, witness testimonies, documents that had remained concealed for years. He laid it all bare. Faced with the overwhelming deluge of evidence, Richard could no longer deny the truth. His veneer of arrogance crumbled, revealing a fragile and contrite man. His voice thick with emotion, he apologized to my father's memory, acknowledged his transgression, and pledged to redress the harm he had inflicted. Richard's public retraction marked a moment of both relief and liberation. Justice had, at long last, been served. My father's memory had, in the end, been vindicated. The serenity of the garden, the stage for our union, stood in stark contrast to the complex decisions we still had to make. While formal justice had been achieved with Richard's retraction, complete restitution demanded a deeper exploration into the roots of that injustice, transcending the personal realm and reaching the social sphere. The foundation we established, though promising, required a more comprehensive vision, one that encompassed not only financial assistance but also the empowerment of marginalized communities, the promotion of equal opportunities, and the defense of the rights of rural laborers who are frequently rendered invisible and exploited. Rather than settling for the superficial resolution of the conflict, we resolved to delve into the depths of Richard's company's practices, uncovering a systematic pattern of exploitation and disregard for workers' rights. Local farmers were subjected to grueling workdays, paltry wages, and unsanitary working conditions, perpetuating a cycle of poverty and inequality. The revelation of this reality galvanized us to act with even greater vehemence, seeking to hold the company accountable and ensure redress for the damages inflicted upon the victims. We don't restrict ourselves to lawsuits and public denunciations. We engage in constructive dialogue with the workers, listening to their accounts, understanding their needs, and seeking collaborative solutions. We establish vocational training programs, furnish legal and medical assistance, and promote the formation of cooperatives, with the objective of bolstering the workers' bargaining power and ensuring their rights are respected. Furthermore, Andrew leveraged his influence within the business realm to champion fairer, more sustainable practices, thereby galvanizing other corporations to embrace ethical and transparent standards in their dealings with both their workforce and the environment. His performance as an engaged business leader inspired others to emulate his approach, fostering a burgeoning movement dedicated to a more equitable and compassionate economy. Concurrently, my experience as a screenwriter has enabled me to give voice to the stories of rural workers, producing documentaries and films that depicted their reality, their challenges, and their achievements. The dissemination of these narratives heightened public awareness, generating support for our initiatives and pressuring authorities to take measures to protect the rights of these workers. Conversely, we faced resistance and opposition from conservative sectors who profited from the exploitation of workers and felt threatened by our actions. We were subjected to personal attacks, smear campaigns, and even physical threats. Nevertheless, our conviction in the righteousness of our cause and the support of the community fortified us to press forward, surmounting obstacles and persevering in the struggle for workers' rights. Furthermore, we strive to forge partnerships with other civil society organizations, uniting our strengths to amplify our impact and fortify our endeavors. We collaborate with trade unions, NGOs, and social movements, sharing resources, expertise, and experiences with the objective of building a network of support and solidarity capable of defending workers' rights throughout the nation. Contemplating the intricate tapestry that has formed thus far, we realize that the seemingly disparate threads of destiny, justice, forgiveness, and social action have intertwined to compose a singular pattern. This is not merely a tapestry of events, but a living, breathing organism, pulsating with each decision made, each obstacle overcome, and each bond strengthened. On this winding journey, the shadow of the past, once a paralyzing specter, has metamorphosed into a subtle guide, a constant reminder of the importance of honoring the memory of those who came before us, of learning from past missteps, and of building a more just and equitable future. The scars, formerly emblems of suffering, have been redefined as symbols of resilience, of the capacity for overcoming adversity, and of inner strength. And so the symphony of life persisted, weaving melodies of hope upon the rubble of the past. The Reynolds Mansion, formerly a stage for shadows and secrets, now shone as a beacon, radiating light to all who dwelled within its orbit. The meticulously tended garden was not merely a space of aesthetic beauty, but a sanctuary of healing and renewal, a silent testament to the transformative power of forgiveness and reconciliation. The memory of my father, John Anderson, had transcended the personal realm, evolving into a legacy of inspiration for future generations. His story, once defined by injustice and pain, now resonated as an anthem to resilience, dignity, and the human capacity to overcome adversity. His profound love for plants, his impeccable work ethic, and his unwavering faith in the inherent goodness of humanity continued to inspire those who knew him and those who had only heard of him. Andrew and I, bound together by a love that blossomed from the ashes of the past, have become agents of social change, leveraging our talents and resources to construct a more just and equitable world. Our foundation, named in honor of my father, has evolved into a catalyst for transformation, supporting groundbreaking initiatives that champion education, environmental stewardship, and social justice. Richard Reynolds' public retraction, however belated, constituted a significant milestone in our journey. His confession, albeit agonizing, paved the way for healing and reconciliation, enabling truth to prevail over falsehood and justice to triumph over injustice. The true reward lies not merely in rectifying past wrongs, but in constructing a future where such errors are never replicated. The pursuit of social justice is a perpetual odyssey, demanding unwavering commitment, constant vigilance, and the active engagement of every member of society. In this moment of reflection, we are invited to contemplate the intricate tapestry of connections that binds us all together. Every action, every word, every choice we make has an impact, however small, on the world around us. We are all accountable for building a more just, more compassionate, and more sustainable future. And as we bid adieu to this narrative, may the message it conveys resonate within our hearts and minds, inspiring us to act with courage, with compassion, and with the unwavering conviction that together, we can forge a better world for all. The true praxis commences now in every act of kindness, in every deed of justice, in every seed of hope we sow in the garden of life. May the memory of John Anderson serve as a guiding light for our steps, a beacon illuminating our path, and a constant reminder that love, forgiveness, and justice are the most potent forces in the universe.